how do we twist while carrying something heavy in a way that's safe? This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. Today we're looking at the spiral squat, as I call it. This is just an extension of basic Alexander Technique principles that we can apply to a particular activity. In this case, moving big heavy stuff where you need to be able to pivot. I already have a previous video on just lifting, but that's staying pretty square, and that's going to look quite similar to a lot of basic weightlifting technique and stuff like that. But what happens when you need to do something like move a heavy box full of piano books around? Or for those of us who live in places where it snows in the winter, like here, shoveling snow. What now? How do we handle that? Raking leaves, lots of yard work might put you in positions where you need to be able to twist safely without hurting yourself. So, some basics here to remember. Your back goes up to your ears, and that still applies even when you are spiraling. The reason I call it a spiral rather than a bend or a turn is spiral gives a really great impression of something that is moving, particularly with an up arrow on your spiral. So if you imagine like a spring going up, staying up and over as you're spiraling is a really great way to help keep that alignment in a place that's helpful. So I'm defining a spiral as rotating around the axis of the spine, or in this case, we might extend that a little bit further, all the way down to the feet. So notice as I go back and forth here, my feet are pivoting. Now, there are some situations where that's not going to work. For example, if you're wearing really heavy, clunky snow boots because you're out shoveling 2 feet of snow, you might want to stay a little bit more solid and be able to just go back and forth like this. So snow up and over, like that. So the biggest thing to notice here is, where am I not bending? I'll do it one more time pretty slowly, and I'll go kind of diagonal so you can see me from the side. Where am I not bending? Or if I'm imagining carrying that big box of piano books, I am not bending in my spine. That's the big thing. So I'm differentiating between a spiral around the axis of the spine versus a bend. So you can think of it as your stack of vertebrae in a tower, rotation rather than putting compression on any one side of them. That's what I'm calling a bend. So the spiral is just the rotation. And that's going to help your bones and muscles stay in a better organization, and it tends to lead to less injuries and strain and fatigue while doing stuff like this. So if we come back to a big old box of piano books that I grabbed from the piano people's stuff, when I get myself up to lift this in the first place, notice I didn't just use my arms. This is just on the edge of being light enough that I could lift this with my arms, but why would I do that when I have legs available? My legs are stronger than my arms. I would like to use them instead. So I'm getting myself set up here so that my arms only just have to stay in position once we get there. So I'm lowering my torso to the right height before I grab it. So as I move this around, here we are. I am allowing my legs to do the work of bending at my hip joints, my knees, and my ankles. This allows me to do things like put this box down to the side without having to necessarily square myself up to it and do a pretty square squat in that way. Oh, it's heavy. So, what I would recommend that you try and work with and practice, first away from the heavy thing, and then try it with the heavy thing, is being able to do this. Either with your feet swiveling back and forth, or keeping feet planted and thinking of that spiral coming all the way down from the opposing foot. So opposing foot, and then I'm up and over from that. That's my up spiral, up this way. As I'm turning to my right, I'm thinking about this spiral up and over to the right. Same to the left, coming from my opposite foot, coming from the right foot, up and over. Once you get this down and have kind of worked out learning this movement, it becomes so much easier to do this kind of thing. With yard work, with carrying stuff, the time when I especially use this is the piano people I share this room with have a whole bunch of fantastic teaching gear for teaching piano to little kids. And it's all in one particular part of the room under the pianos. And sometimes I need to move that stuff in order to get to my things. So I'll need to get under the piano and twist and pull out, for example, this box when there's a piano in the way to the side and I can't just like get square to it. So this spiral squat tends to be pretty mechanically effective and pretty safe to do. What we're avoiding is lifting with the back, right? Doing any sort of bend to grab something and then straining the back muscles in order to lift something heavy. That's when you're going to risk getting hurt, either in muscles or in the discs in between your vertebrae. That's the potential risk there. Also, keep in mind that anytime you hold something further away from your center, it's going to be harder. Keep it close to your center, such as my big old box here. I'm keeping this really close to my center because if I don't, the second it gets out here, I can barely lift that. Very heavy. So keeping it close to myself allows me to use better mechanical advantage for working with this thing. So stay safe, enjoy lifting things, and remember that you can always come back to basic movement, curiosity, and analysis. What am I doing? How am I doing it? How do I move this mech with the least amount of fuel and the least amount of chance that I would do something that could harm my skeletal system?